It's Ash from Super Videos back for another video for the Walking Dead universe. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at who came back. Of course, in the latest episode of Daryl Dixon spinoff, Season 1, Episode 5, we heard a radio conversation between Carol and Daryl, and Carol mentioned someone is back. Of course, the radio cut off, so we couldn't quite hear who she was referring to, but there are theories around who it could be and how it could all connect in terms of things that we've seen in the other properties in the franchise. So stay tuned, we'll be right back to break this down. Alright, as always, before we dive into it, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. With that said, let's dive right into it. So of course, we did see in a flashback, Daryl was finally able to communicate with Carol. There was a radio communication between the two of them, and this is, from what we're assuming, not the first radio conversation after Daryl left at the end of the series, so they probably had several conversations before then. Daryl might have even went back to Commonwealth at some point, but continued his search later. But what we do know is that at some point Carol mentioned someone is back. If we're gonna say exactly what she said something ick is back. So from the impression that I got, it's someone with an ick in their name. Of course, that could be just our ears playing tricks on us, but that being said, we're going to look at all of the different theories, regardless of whether the person has an ick in their name. First possibility is Ezekiel. Of course, ick could have been Ezekiel's cancer is back, because it got cut off, so we didn't hear what exactly Carol was saying. So maybe she was saying Ezekiel's cancer is back. Of course, we did see Ezekiel's cancer get healed at the end of the series by Commonwealth doctors, but maybe his cancer came back, and that's what Carol is telling Daryl. Now, with that said, what do I think? I think there are things that support that, but there are things that don't support that. For example, why would they do this in the story? Like, what's the point of having Ezekiel's cancer be back? You know what I mean? It feels almost pointless. I'm leaning more towards it not being Ezekiel. However, if we listen to the conversation between Daryl and Carol, it could be that she was talking about Ezekiel, because she did say that she was trying to get used to it, and then Daryl kind of asked whether she was doing all right. So that could mean that whatever they were talking about is personal for Carol. And of course, Ezekiel's name is the first person that comes up when it comes to Carol's personal life. So it could have been that she was talking about Ezekiel's cancer, but I highly doubt it. Next possibility is none other than Rick Grimes himself. Obviously, Rick has an ick in their name, just like Ezekiel had an ick in his name. So again, if we're going with that ick theory, then it could be Rick. What Carol is basically telling Daryl is that Rick came back to Commonwealth, which is super awesome. Now, of course, it wouldn't make sense for Rick to come back by himself. Like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for him to be by himself. It does, however, make sense if Michonne is with him. So I could definitely see a scenario where Carol was talking about Rick and Michonne. Maybe she didn't mention Michonne by name. She just said Rick because that was the most relevant, because that was the most kind of important for Daryl, because let's not forget, the reason why Daryl left in the first place is to look for Rick. So that could be it. Carol could have been saying, Rick is back. Don't worry, come back. Everything is fine now. You don't need to continue searching for Rick. Now, with that said, what do I think? I think that it could be a good thing to have Rick come back to Commonwealth and for Daryl to just return. And that would be the end of the Daryl Dixon spinoff. Like, it would be a good way to have this story be limited and not have it continue. But at the same time, depending on how they time everything and how everything comes together, it could be hard to pull off. Like, I doubt they're gonna reveal exactly what they were talking about in the finale of the Daryl Dixon, which means that they're gonna need to explain it in the Rick and Michonne. And I think that's an extra layer of complexity that you just don't need to add given that the Rick and Michonne spinoff is already going to be packed with a lot of stuff. So it just doesn't quite make sense unless they do that in the Daryl Dixon spinoff later on, maybe in future seasons. But then again, that brings up the question of how convoluted is that going to get, and how is that going to work when it comes to the Rick and Michonne spinoff and what they can do in that. So they have to be real careful how they bring all of these things together. Now, the next possibility is actually someone that doesn't have an ick in their name, but it's another character that has been long rumored to return at some point in one of the spin-offs after he left the Fear the Walking Dead spin-off. We're talking about Morgan. Of course, in Morgan's final episode, Morgan and his kid left. They went back to Virginia. Morgan was searching for Rick. So it definitely makes a lot of sense for Carol to be talking about Morgan. So that's awesome. But at the same time, the thing that I don't really understand is, how is that really going to work? Like, if Morgan is in fact the person Carol was talking about, where are you going to explain this? Where are you going to actually show it? You can't do it in the Daryl Dixon. You can't do it in the Rick and Michonne unless Morgan gets a spinoff on his own later and they do it there. Or some other spinoff in the future gives us that particular story. So I think that it just doesn't make sense for that to be it, because it just doesn't line up properly with everything going on right now. The next person that Carol could have been talking about is someone else that's in Fear the Walking Dead. I'm talking about Dwight and his wife Sherry. Now, the reason why Carol might be bringing this up is because, of course, Daryl banished Dwight the last time that he saw him at the end of the war with the Saviors. So that might be something that Carol would want to tell Daryl because it's important. So that could be something that's a possibility. And of course, it's even more of a possibility given what we know from the latter half of the final season of Fear the Walking Dead. We know that Dwight and Sherry actually return to Virginia as well. They return to the sanctuary. So that's definitely an indication that we might in fact see something at the end of Fear with them going back to Commonwealth or something along those lines, and that could connect to the scene that we saw with Carol on the radio. Who knows? We might even see that radio call between Daryl and Carol at the end of Fear the Walking Dead, and we might see it from Carol's perspective instead of from Daryl's perspective. So that's definitely a possibility as well. Now, with all of that said, let's talk a little bit about why they didn't reveal who they were talking about or who Carol was talking about. Of course, from a storyline perspective, they wanted to add mystery, so that's why they didn't reveal it. But in reality, the reason why they probably didn't reveal it is because they don't even know themselves. So they wanted to make it open enough for them to be able to figure it out at some point later when they have it all figured out. So they didn't want to push themselves into a corner by revealing who they were talking about just in case. So for example, if they said Rick and we heard Rick, if they couldn't make that work for the story, then they had to force something in. So because of that, they wanted to do something that's open enough where they can just plug a name in there, make it work at some point, and no one's gonna call it out and say it's a plot hole. So that's my opinion why they didn't really reveal it. And of course, like I said, the mystery part. Everyone's gonna be talking about this. We're talking about this on this video. So it's gonna bring a lot of buzz to future spin-offs because people are gonna be thinking how it's gonna connect to everything. So that all makes sense from that perspective as well. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to go through in this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.